She was quiet, almost invisible, just another soldier in the dust. But when the SEAL commander saw her break down a .50 caliber with surgeon's hands, he stopped cold. What he learned next would rewrite everything he thought possible. A 3,247-meter kill shot. A trigger pull that bent the edge of human limits. This is the story of Sarah, the sniper you were never supposed to know about. The desert sun had no mercy. It hammered down on the forward operating base until the sand shimmered like broken glass. Diesel fumes clung to the air. The hum of generators was constant, like a pulse the base couldn't live without. Commander Jake Morrison walked slowly, boots grinding against the gravel paths, checking on his men, their weapons, their eyes. He had spent 12 years in special operations, and he thought nothing could surprise him anymore. But that morning, something did. Near the weapons maintenance shed, a figure sat cross-legged on a tarp. The Barrett .50 caliber lay before her, stripped to its bones. Springs, screws, and metal plates were spread in perfect order, aligned as if some invisible ruler kept them straight. Dust swirled, settling on everything except her workspace. She moved like she had done this ritual thousands of times. Each piece was lifted, inspected, rubbed clean with a cloth that looked older than she was. No fumbling, no hesitation. She handled the heavy parts as though their weight belonged to her. Morrison slowed. Soldiers often treated weapon maintenance like brushing teeth. Necessary, boring, quick. But this woman, she moved like an artist carving details into stone. Even the way she held a screwdriver carried purpose. Her hair was pulled tight into a ponytail. Scars lined her knuckles, faint but unmistakable. Her fatigues were regulation, loose and practical, but they didn't disguise what Morrison saw in her posture. Control. He checked his wristwatch out of habit. The glass was cracked, the hand stuck at 0217. It hadn't worked for years, but he kept it anyway. A reminder of a mission where time had broken and never restarted. He didn't even notice he was twisting it now, the metal digging into his wrist as his eyes stayed locked on her. A couple of young privates walked by, glanced once, then kept moving. They saw just another soldier doing routine work. But Morrison couldn't look away. Something told him this wasn't routine at all. She began reassembly. Each part clicked into place without pause. Her fingers danced over metal and glass. A tiny twist of a screw here, a delicate shift of a pin there. She wasn't just putting it back together. She was refining it, sculpting it, bending the machine to her will. It took nearly 2 hours. And Morrison stayed. When she finally shouldered the rifle and tested the bolt, she nodded once to herself. Not satisfaction, confirmation. She cleaned the cloth carefully, folded it, and set it beside the rifle. Only then did she notice him standing there. Her eyes met his. Sharp, alert, measuring. The kind of eyes that took in everything. The angle of his stance. The dust on his boots, the useless watch on his wrist. That was impressive work, soldier, Morrison said, voice casual, though he felt anything but. I don't think I've ever seen anyone break down a Barrett that fast. Or that carefully. She stood, lifting the massive rifle with an ease that made the 30 pounds look like nothing. Just routine maintenance. Sir? Her voice was calm, low, with a weight under it. Routine. He almost laughed. His snipers would have taken twice as long and skipped half the details. What's your name and unit? He asked. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, 75th Ranger Regiment, currently attached to intelligence. She shifted the rifle in her hands like it was part of her body. My grandfather taught me your weapon is your life. Take care of it, and it takes care of you. Morrison nodded. He liked the sound of that. Her gaze softened a fraction at the mention of her grandfather. Marine sniper. Korean War. He started me shooting when I was 8. Said every part of a weapon tells a story if you learn to listen. Morrison studied her. That explained a lot. How long have you been running the Barrett? 6 years active. She brushed dust from the receiver. It's more patient than people think. Everyone sees power, but it's really about precision and patience. Female rangers were rare. Female ranger snipers almost unheard of. Yet here she stood, hands scarred, voice steady, eyes unflinching. And what brings you to Chapman? Rangers don't usually camp with intel units. She hesitated. A pause measured in heartbeats. I have specialized skills, useful for certain reconnaissance missions. Can't discuss specifics. He recognized that answer. Translation. She does things few others can, and none of it makes the papers. He tested her. How many confirmed kills? Her eyes didn't blink. Officially classified. Unofficially, I've never missed when it mattered. The words weren't boastful. They were flat, like stone. Morrison felt something cold crawl up his spine. The Barrett's range is 1,800 meters, give or take. He pressed. For most shooters, she said. She adjusted the scope casually as if to prove her point. With the right operator, much more. His throat felt dry. How much more? She looked straight at him. The courtyard noise faded. The world seemed to shrink to her eyes and his question. Let's just say, record-setting. The silence after that was heavy. Morrison's cracked watch felt heavier too, digging against his pulse. He knew enough to realize what she meant. Something beyond training, beyond doctrine. A shot that should have been impossible. I'd like to hear that story one day, he said carefully. Perhaps, sir. She slung the Barrett across her back with effortless balance. Right now I need to verify function at the range. She walked past him, boots whispering against dust. For a moment, Morrison almost let her go, but instinct gripped him. Sergeant, he called. She paused, turning her head just slightly. I'm planning advanced training next week. My snipers need sharpening. Would you be interested? She studied him. The silence stretched. Then she nodded once. I'd be honored, sir. Clear it with my CO and I'll be there. When she left, the bass seemed louder. Generators hummed again. Shouts from the motor pool carried. But Morrison stood rooted, staring at the spot where she'd been. He turned the broken watch in his hand. For the first time in years, he wished it still ticked. He wanted to mark the moment, because something told him. This wasn't just another soldier passing through. This was the beginning of something. Something that would bend the edges of what he thought possible. 3 days later, the range was alive before dawn. Steel plates clanged faintly as crewmen set them at distances that stretched the length of the valley. Morrison's SEALs arrived in clusters, curious, skeptical. They had heard whispers of a female ranger, a sniper who cleaned her Barrett like a surgeon with a scalpel. But whispers meant little in the cold air. Sarah arrived last, punctual to the second. She carried her Barrett in one hand and a weather meter in the other. A range bag slung across her back bumped against her shoulder as she walked. She wasted no words. She laid out her instruments on the shooting table, neat as chess pieces. Morrison gathered his men. Staff Sergeant Chen will be instructing today. Watch carefully. Learn. If you think you already know everything, you don't. The SEALs sized her up quietly. Chief Williams, the senior sniper, offered a polite nod. Ma'am, appreciate the time. What's the plan? She scanned the range. We'll begin at 600. Accuracy work, then push to 1,000. The goal isn't tricks, it's consistency. Her voice was clipped, precise. She spoke like she expected to be obeyed. Out came her tools. Ballistic software on a tablet, anemometer spinning in the light wind, notebooks filled with calculations. The SEALs glanced at one another. They were used to drilling hard and fast, rounds downrange first, explanations later. But Sarah flipped their rhythm. No shots until we know the conditions, she said, kneeling by the dirt recording readings. Temperature, humidity, wind at surface and aloft. You don't own your bullet until you account for these. They obeyed grudgingly at first. For the next hour she moved from man to man, adjusting elbows, shifting cheek welds, correcting the half-inch drag of a trigger finger. Tiny things, invisible things. Williams fired a 5-round group. He peered through his scope, then froze. Tightest I've ever had at 600, he muttered. Sarah gave the faintest smile. You removed 3 inconsistencies. Small changes, big results. Bit by bit, suspicion softened into respect. The SEALs leaned in when she spoke. They listened, and yet she never fired a shot herself. She was there for them, not for demonstration, until Martinez, one of the younger snipers, asked, Sergeant, don't you want to show us what you can do? The range quieted. Morrison watched her. She had been waiting for that moment. The furthest plate here is 1,200, Morrison said. Think you can hit it? Sarah tilted her head. I can hit it, sir. But that isn't a challenge for the Barrett. She lay prone, Barrett cradled in her arms. Calculations whispered across her tablet. Wind flags snapped lightly. Her breathing slowed until her body was stone. The crack of the rifle split the valley. Steel rang. Center hit. Dead center, Williams confirmed, all replacing doubt. Sarah cycled the bolt and fired again. This time at a silhouette plate barely visible. Another center hit, Martinez exhaled. So, what's your usual distance? Her hands paused over the rifle. Then she said so quietly they had to lean in. My longest confirmed kill was 3,247 meters. The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Morrison's cracked watch felt colder against his wrist. William shook his head. That's impossible. Sarah's eyes were calm. 6 months ago I would have agreed. But sometimes impossible becomes necessary. The men stared at her, the range forgotten. Morrison knew then. He was about to hear a story none of them would forget. Her voice carried no drama, only fact. Yet every man leaned closer. My unit had tracked a Taliban commander for 3 weeks. He planned convoy ambushes, killed too many of ours. He met his lieutenants at dawn, always at the same ruined Soviet outpost on a ridge. She pointed toward the distant mountains beyond the range. The only position we had was across the valley. Distance measured 3,247 meters. Martinez muttered. At that range, bullet flight's 4 seconds. 4.3, Sarah said. Plenty of time for doubt. She described the 3 days she and her spotter lay hidden. They studied every gust of wind, every shimmer of heat. They mapped the mountain like monks mapping scripture. At night, she cleaned the Barrett in silence, cloth moving over steel until her hands cramped. Symbol. Below their hide, a dusty road twisted through the valley, scarred by burned-out trucks. Every convoy that died there weighed on us, she said. That road was the reason for the shot. On the 4th morning, the target stepped into the courtyard. Tiny, pencil-tip through her scope. I thought of my grandfather, Sarah whispered. Trust your training. Trust your weapon. Trust yourself. She exhaled, squeezed. 4 seconds stretched into eternity. The world held its breath. And then, she said, her voice steady, impact, direct hit. The commander dropped. The network unraveled in a week. The SEALs sat frozen, struck by the enormity. Morrison's pulse hammered. His broken watch weighed like lead. Why isn't that kill public? Williams asked. Classified, Sarah said. The commander's death prevented an attack that would have killed hundreds. But no record. No recognition. Only my spotter and I know the distance. She brushed a thumb along the Barrett's receiver as if tracing memory. I hope I never have to try again. Morrison studied her. She wasn't boasting. She was burdened. 2 weeks later, a secure briefing room glowed with satellite images. The faces around the table were grim. Morrison pointed to a compound built into a mountainside near the Pakistani border. Target terrorist commander, planning a major strike. No ground assault possible. No airstrike, too many civilians. Drone unreliable. That leaves one option. Sarah leaned forward, scanning angles, elevations. What's the distance? 2,800 meters. The room hushed. Williams muttered, That's insane. Sarah's expression didn't change. Feasible if we prepare, Morrison pressed. What would you need? Her list was methodical. 6 months of weather data. A week in position to study currents firsthand. Custom ammunition, scope modifications. A high-altitude insertion, 4 days approach under cover of night. As she spoke, Morrison watched her transform. Doubt faded. Calculation replaced it. She was alive in the problem. On the wall, the map glowed. Red string pinned the overwatch point to the compound, a fragile spider's web across valleys and ridges. Morrison saw it for what it was, a web where they were the spider and the prey. Williams shook his head. Even if everything's perfect, 60% chance at best. Better than any other option, Sarah said. Morrison locked eyes with her. Would you take the shot? Silence. Then Sarah. If command approves and my superiors allow, yes. I'll make it count. The men shifted uneasily. It wasn't just the distance. It was the stakes. The mountain woke like an animal in slow breath. Frost clung to rock and cloth. The sky held its first pale hint of light. Morrison lay behind a jag of granite, cheek against the stone, eyes on the compound 2 valleys away. It looked small enough to pinch between finger and thumb. Unreal, like a toy, but his cracked binocular lens said otherwise. Every scuff on the courtyard stones showed. Every shadow carried a risk. Sarah lay prone 5 paces to his left. The Barrett nested in a cradle of sandbags and folded coats. Her face was bare. No paint, no swagger. Just stillness. She'd been that way for an hour, sinking into the ground until even the wind forgot she was there. Martinez, serving as spotter, murmured updates. Wind 3 knots from northwest. Gusts irregular. Thermal layering minimal. Temp 42. Pressure 24.8. Sarah whispered back the numbers as if she were telling beads. She wrote on the waterproof card clipped to her sleeve. Tiny corrections, elevation, spin drift, Coriolis. She checked the scope. Checked again. Tapped the turret once, then stopped. Like she didn't trust any movement unless it earned the right to exist. Morrison checked his watch. Useless. The hands still frozen at 0217. He rubbed the cracked face with his thumb anyway. A habit he couldn't kill. The watch had survived a blast he hadn't. Time had kept running without him. He kept it to remind himself he'd been spared for a reason. That reason now lay in the scope of a woman who breathed like a ghost. The insertion had been perfect. 4 nights of blacked-out movement. Days buried under netting and rocks, sipping water through a tube, chewing rations until taste was a memory. The team had shrunk into the terrain, erasing boot prints with soft bristled brushes, folding their trash, swallowing their impatience. Sarah had asked for it that way. Every detail, every ritual. The mountain demanded tribute, and she paid it in attention. At 0707, shadow slanted across the compound wall in a line Sarah had predicted down to a minute. "He'll appear between now and 7:30, she murmured. "He likes the light on his left shoulder. He likes to face his men with the sun behind him." There was no arrogance in her voice, only pattern. She trusted patterns the way others trusted prayers. The air shifted. It was small at first. A lick of breeze that touched the back of Morrison's neck and went away. Martinez felt it too. He raised the meter, let it spin. 2.5 now. Drift increasing at mid-path. Sarah didn't move. Flags? Downrange left flag stiffened. Middle flag's irregular. No change at target flag. Layered currents, Sarah said. We'll cut a sliver off elevation. Add 1 click windage. Half a click hold. Morrison swallowed. "Sergeant, if you don't like it, I like truth," she said. "Truth is wind changes. We respect it." She studied the meter. Wrote again. Then she stilled. The compound stirred. Men in loose clothes crossed the courtyard with cups and rifles. A boy pushed a wheelbarrow of sand. A stray dog traced the shadow line and lay down. The details felt absurd from so far away, intimate, painful. "Movement," Martinez said. His voice flattened. "Door, main building." A figure stepped into the light, middle-aged, shoulders square, hands behind his back as if conducting an orchestra of men. He walked to the same pale slab he had used all week. Stopped on the same crack in the stone, turned his face into the sun, just like Sarah had promised. The dusty road far below them curled like a scar across the valley floor. Morrison thought of convoys burned on that road, of letters written home by men who never arrived. He tasted diesel that wasn't there. He had told himself this shot was about strategy. He now remembered it was about mercy. "Range confirmed 2847, Martinez said. "Hold steady." "Air stable, stable." Sarah's breathing slowed to almost nothing. She became a portrait, a rumor. Her finger found the trigger as if it had been there all her life. Her cheek slept on the stock. The mountain leaned in. "Shot when ready," Morrison whispered, though he knew she didn't need his permission. "Taking the shot in 3, she said. 2, 1. The Barrett cracked. The sound slapped the rocks and ran down the valley like a warning. Then there was only silence, the kind that hums. Morrison started his stopwatch out of habit, then realized what he'd done and almost laughed. The watch in his pocket had never started when he needed it. The stopwatch now counted, an honest thing in a dishonest world. The bullet left the muzzle at a speed the body cannot imagine and the mind tries not to. It dove into invisible rivers of air that didn't care about men or missions. It fought gravity's patient hand. It carried hope and math and a woman's steady breath across a distance longer than some lives. 2 seconds, Martinez said. Wind holding. Through the cracked lens, the target was a speck with a heartbeat. Men spoke to him. He lifted a hand. The dog shifted. A flag tugged and fell again. 3, Martinez said. 3.5! The bullet flew between layers that were not written on any map. Morrison felt each tenth of a second as an ache under his ribs. 4, Martinez breathed. The courtyard changed. A man stepped half a pace into the line of fire. The target turned his head. The boy with the wheelbarrow tripped. The dog lifted its ears. Something flashed at a window on the second floor. A glint, quick and sharp counter-sniper? Morrison's throat locked. He leaned into the scope, too late to warn, too late for anything. 4.2, Martinez said. The target's face tilted. A smile, a question, all of it impossibly clear and impossibly far. Impact lived somewhere in the next breath. Sound returned as a shiver, a small shudder of the courtyard dust, a man collapsing in a shape that didn't belong to the living. For an instant it seemed like the mountain refused to acknowledge it. Then men in the compound scattered. A kettle crashed. The dog bolted. The boy's wheelbarrow tipped and bled sand. Martinez exhaled. Confirmed. Target down. No movement. Sarah didn't lift her head. Window. I've got it, Martinez said. Second floor, left pane. Possible rifle. Morrison searched. The glint had vanished.